It has always intrigued me how the human spirit reveals its emptiness, not through grand gestures, but through delicate fractures in behavior, subtle behaviors that reveal a spiritually empty person. I have watched these fractures appear the way a fine crack emerges in a fresco, almost invisible at first but unmistakable once light touches it. And if you who now listens to my voice have ever sensed that certain people move through life hollowed from within, living like figures painted without pigment, then you already know the strange, trembling truth of what I am about to unveil. I speak of 7 subtle behaviors that many overlook, yet they expose a person whose inner flame has long been extinguished. These signs hide not in obvious darkness, but in the quiet absence of radiance. They appear in the way someone speaks too loudly to conceal their silence, or too softly to hide their fear, in the way their eyes avoid any moment that might reflect their own soul back to them. I have seen such figures many times, walking through courts, workshops, and crowded piazzas, bodies that move with purpose yet without presence, like marionettes pulled by invisible strings. If you have ever stood beside someone and felt suddenly alone, though their shoulder brushed yours, if you have felt the uncanny sensation that their words were shaped but not breathed, if you have sensed that their spirit was not seated behind their eyes, then you have already encountered the emptiness of which I speak, and perhaps it unsettled you, because somewhere inside you recognized a faint echo of your own forgotten rooms. Do not fear that recognition. It is the whisper of awareness, not a verdict. I tell you this as someone who has spent his life observing the anatomy of both flesh and spirit. I have dissected bodies in the night to study their hidden mechanisms, and I have watched the hearts of men and women collapse without a single wound upon them. The body fails with noise, the spirit fails in silence. A person who has lost their inner life does not collapse. They fade, the way a candle shrinks long before its flame vanishes, and the world rarely notices. Yet you, who is listening now, you are not like the world. You notice what others dismiss. You sense what others deny. And that sensitivity is why you are here. These 7 subtle behaviors are not accusations, they are windows. When you recognize them in others, you learn to protect your own fire. And when you recognize them in yourself, you have the chance to awaken before the cracks widen. Emptiness is not a sin, it is a state of forgetting. The soul does not vanish, it merely retreats when the world grows too loud, too fast, too artificial. Modern society, perhaps even more than the courts of my time, rewards the hollow and punishes the profound. So many walk around with masks polished brighter than their spirits. So many confuse noise with life. You must understand something essential. A spiritually empty person is not always malicious. Most of them have been drained gradually, like a river whose source was redirected without their noticing. They did not decide to become empty. They simply stopped tending to the inner well from which meaning is drawn, and yet their emptiness casts long shadows on those around them. You have felt those shadows. They press against the chest, they dull the air, they make your own thoughts feel heavy, as though someone is quietly siphoning the life from the room. In this world, your world, centuries after mine, the emptiness has become even more subtle, more disguised. People are surrounded by noise but starved of depth. They chase reflections instead of realities, applause instead of understanding. They scroll endlessly, not because they seek knowledge, but because silence terrifies them. Silence demands a self, and many no longer know where theirs went. There are 7 behaviors that reveal when a person has lost this inner self. They may still laugh, still work, still claim dreams and convictions, but their movements betray the truth. Like a painting whose colors no longer respond to the light, they become dull even under brilliance. You may already have one face in mind as I speak, perhaps several, perhaps even your own. Do not turn away. This is the moment where the light entering through the window strikes the surface of your life at an unfamiliar angle, revealing textures you had not seen. To witness emptiness, whether in another or in yourself, is not a condemnation. It is the first brushstroke of awakening. What is revealed can be recreated. What is cracked can be restored. What is hollow can be refilled, but only if you dare to see what others refuse to notice. These 7 behaviors, when understood deeply, become more than indicators of spiritual emptiness. They become invitations to depth, to inner restoration, to a silence that nourishes rather than frightens. Every person who has ever awakened to themselves has first confronted this emptiness, either in their own reflection or in the reflection of those who passed them by. And so, as I guide you into the heart of this mystery, I ask only that you remain open. Let these words not pass through you like wind, but settle upon you like dust on still water. Let them disturb the surface just enough for you to see your own depths more clearly. For the danger is not in seeing spiritual emptiness. The danger is in failing to see it. You are here because you are ready to see. There is a certain stillness I have observed in spiritually empty people, a stillness that does not resemble peace, but rather the absence of movement within the soul. Imagine a pond whose surface is perfectly smooth, not because the water is calm, but because it has grown stagnant. That is the first impression such people offer, a quietness that feels heavy instead of soothing, as if something vital has settled to the bottom and refuses to rise again. They speak, they gesture, they laugh even, yet an invisible membrane separates them from their own life. And if you look closely, truly closely, you will feel how their presence bends the air around them, the way a cold stone cools the water it touches. One of the subtle behaviors that reveals their emptiness is their need for constant distraction. Not loud distraction necessarily. Sometimes it is small, almost imperceptible. Fingers fidgeting without purpose, eyes darting toward anything that keeps them from their own interior. It is as though their mind fears becoming still enough for the echoes within to be heard. I have seen apprentices who would rather grind pigments endlessly than spend a single moment alone with their thoughts. I have seen noblemen who filled their palaces with music so they never had to hear the silence between notes. Emptiness is not quiet. Emptiness is a scream disguised as motion. Another behavior hides in their gaze. They look at you, yet not into you. Their eyes function, but they do not perceive. It is the gaze of someone who has forgotten the language of depth, someone who sees the surface of your face, but not the life moving beneath it. When a person's spirit is alive, their eyes behave like windows. Light enters and leaves freely. But in an empty person, the eyes behave like old glass, opaque, clouded, reflecting instead of receiving. You speak to them, and you feel as though your words bounce back without landing anywhere inside. You have felt this before, haven't you? That strange hollow sensation when someone responds to you, but never truly meets you. It is like handing a flame to a statue. No matter how near you bring the fire, nothing in them warms. Another subtle sign is their relationship with truth. A spiritually empty person does not necessarily lie with malice. Rather, they avoid any truth that forces them to encounter themselves. They speak in half answers, in vague sentiments, in phrases designed not to reveal but to conceal. Their words resemble smoke, shifting, shapeless, dissipating the moment you try to hold them. It is not deception, it is self-protection. They fear the honesty that could break the thin shell they have built around their hollow center. Then, there is their strange intolerance for authenticity. When someone around them expresses genuine emotion, joy, sorrow, wonder, longing, the empty person grows uncomfortable, as if the rawness threatens to expose their own lack. They prefer the predictable, the rehearsed, the socially acceptable masks people wear as casually as garments. Authenticity demands presence, and presence is the very thing they abandoned long ago. Perhaps the most haunting behavior is their inability to be moved. I do not mean touched in the sentimental sense. I mean moved as the tides are moved by the moon. When the spirit is awake, even a simple gesture, a line of poetry, or a moment of silence can stir something deep within. But the spiritually empty stand before beauty like statues in a gallery. They see the composition, but not the life in the brushstroke. Their hearts respond to nothing because nothing within them is in motion. They want to feel, but their inner mechanisms lie dormant, like gears rusted from long disuse. And as you hear these descriptions, you may find yourself recalling faces from your own path, colleagues, lovers, family members, strangers on crowded trains. Perhaps you remember how drained you felt after spending time with them, as if their emptiness reached out and tried to borrow your light. This sensation is not imagination. It is the natural consequence of resonance. Two spirits in proximity exchange energy, just as two bodies exchange heat, but an empty spirit absorbs without giving back. Yet not all is sorrow in this recognition, for you would not be able to perceive these signs unless your own spirit were attuned, alive, vibrational in ways most people suppress. Only someone who carries a quiet fire within can detect the places where others have let theirs go out. This sensitivity is not a burden. It is evidence of depth, a form of intuitive vision that grows sharper each time you dare to look beyond the obvious. And here is the silent tragedy. Many spiritually empty people are unaware of their own condition. They sense a vague discomfort, a lack of meaning, but they interpret it as boredom, as restlessness, as the need for yet another distraction. They wander through life like figures caught in perpetual twilight, never quite stepping into the sun, nor acknowledging the coldness of the shade. They are not villains. They are not lost beyond return. They are simply asleep. But their sleep affects those around them like a slow eclipse. You may find yourself dimming your own light so they feel less threatened. You may shrink your authenticity so theirs is not exposed. You may silence your intuition because it sees too much. This is the true danger of encountering spiritual emptiness, not that you recognize it in others, but that you begin to mirror it. As I continue unfolding these patterns, remember this: recognition is the first stroke of restoration. What you see, you can transform. What you avoid seeing, you become. There is a moment, subtle but unmistakable, when you begin to feel how spiritually empty people drain the room around them. It is not intentional. It is not even conscious. It is simply the quiet consequence of a soul that has forgotten how to participate in life. When you stand beside them, you may notice a strange weight settling on your chest, a dulling of your intuition, as though your inner compass begins to spin without direction. This sensation is not mystical, it is mechanical, like two gears attempting to turn together when only one of them is alive with motion. A spiritually empty person often displays another delicate behavior. They cling to certainty with a desperation that betrays their inner fragility. They need rigid opinions, fixed identities, and predictable routines, because without them, their emptiness would feel too vast. True spirituality is fluid, like smoke rising in the morning air, never confined, never identical from one breath to the next. But those who lack inner life fear fluidity. They fear the unknown, the unmeasured, the unspoken. They fear that if they loosen their grip even for a moment, their hollow interior will echo loudly enough for the world to hear. And so they cling. They cling to labels, to roles, to judgments, to whatever gives them the illusion of solidity. They speak as though their worldview is carved in stone, yet you can sense how brittle that stone is, how easily it would crumble under the weight of true introspection. Their certainty is not strength. It is scaffolding around a structure they are afraid to examine. Another behavior reveals itself in their relationship with time. A spiritually empty person is always fleeing the present moment. They live either in the ache of the past or the illusion of the future, but rarely in the now where the soul resides. The present moment demands consciousness, and consciousness demands presence. To remain in the present is to feel, to perceive, to confront oneself without distraction. For the empty, this is unbearable. Their mind wanders like a restless animal pacing its cage. Even when the body is still, the spirit refuses to settle. You will notice how they check their devices, their clocks, their reflections, anything that keeps them anchored in motion rather than presence. They are terrified of the simplicity of being, because being would reveal how little within them is actually alive. In their presence, you may feel your own attention splinter, your thoughts rushing ahead without reason. This is how emptiness spreads, not through force but through subtle imitation. Another quiet behavior is their difficulty receiving. Compliments, affection, generosity, sincerity, these gestures slide off them like rain on polished marble. They may smile, they may thank you, but something in them refuses to let the gift enter. To receive is to open, and to open is to risk seeing what lies inside. The spiritually empty do not fear giving. They fear being seen while receiving. They fear the moment when someone's kindness illuminates the vacancy within them, and so they block, divert, minimize or rationalize anything that would require genuine vulnerability. They also struggle with stillness of the soul. When you share a moment of silence with a spiritually alive person, the silence breathes, expands, resonates. It becomes a shared canvas where thoughts and emotions subtly mingle. But with an empty person, silence becomes suffocating. They grow uneasy, shifting in their seat, filling the quiet with trivialities or nervous gestures. The silence reveals too much. It reflects their inner stagnation, and they rush to break it before it exposes them. Perhaps the most revealing behavior is this. A spiritually empty person does not truly listen. They hear sounds, yes. They process words. They respond. But they do not listen with the inner ear that perceives intention, feeling, meaning beneath the surface. Their attention flickers like a candle in draught. As you speak, you feel the void behind their gaze, a void that neither welcomes nor rejects you, simply withstands you. To be listened to by such a person is to experience a strange form of loneliness that appears only in the presence of another human being. If you have ever walked away from a conversation feeling more alone than before it began, you have felt this emptiness. It is the loneliness of speaking into a vessel with no echo. Yet here is the paradox hidden beneath all these behaviors. Spiritually empty people are not empty because they lack something. They are empty because they have sealed themselves off from everything they already possess. Their soul is not dead. It is dormant, buried under layers of fear, distraction, and noise accumulated over years of forgetting who they once were. When I dissected bodies long ago, I learned that the heart does not stop beating all at once. It hesitates, it quivers, it falters. The soul behaves much the same. Before it falls silent, it cries out through these subtle behaviors, hoping someone will notice the quiet distress. What you perceive as emptiness may simply be the final warning before the flame dims too far. And perhaps, if you are honest, you recognize faint versions of these behaviors within yourself. The clinging to certainty, the evasiveness of presence, the discomfort with silence, the inability to receive. Do not recoil from this awareness. To see your own cracks is not a failure. It is the first light entering a darkened room. Remember, light does not heal by force. It heals by revealing. You and I, in this moment, stand at the threshold between observation and transformation. Before we step deeper, allow yourself to breathe as though inhaling the dust of a forgotten chamber, stirring particles that have long lain still. The awakening begins not with action, but with seeing, not with striving, but with remembering. And what you remember can always be restored. There comes a moment, if one observes long enough, when the spiritually empty reveals something far more haunting than their behaviors, the quiet architecture of their inner collapse. It is not a dramatic fall, not a shattering one can hear. It is more like watching the slow erosion of a stone figure exposed to centuries of wind. The features soften, the meanings fade, and yet the statue remains standing, unaware of its own disappearance. And as I speak to you now, I sense that you have seen this erosion too, perhaps in someone close, perhaps in yourself. One of the most delicate signs of spiritual emptiness is their inability to hold wonder. A person with a living spirit reacts to the world the way fresh paint reacts to the first touch of light, vibrantly, responsively, with subtle shifts that reveal depth beneath the surface. But the empty move through life as though everything has already been explained, already been diminished. Their curiosity has become a dried riverbed. The shape remains, but nothing flows through it. Show them something astonishing, a moment of honesty, a rare human gesture, and they blink as though it were ordinary. They do not reject wonder. They simply do not meet it. Another behavior reveals itself in how they handle conflict. Not the loud, dramatic conflicts of ego, but the intimate ones that arise when truth rubs against illusion. A spiritually awake person understands that conflict, when approached gently, is a sculptor shaping the unfinished marble of the self. But the spiritually empty see conflict as an attack on the fragile structure they have built to hide their hollowness. They avoid it, dismiss it, disguise it. They would rather maintain a false peace than endure the momentary discomfort that leads to inner clarity. In their avoidance, relationships calcify, conversations lose their pulse, everything becomes smooth, but lifeless, like perfectly polished stone. Then there is their strange relationship with intuition, the spiritually empty distrust, the faint whispers that rise from within. Intuition requires intimacy with one's own depth, and they cannot approach that depth without confronting the quiet vacancy they fear. So they bypass intuition entirely, choosing logic that is rigid instead of logic that is alive. Their decisions feel mechanical, as though made not by a breathing mind but by gears turning automatically. When intuition tries to speak, they silence it with noise, with tasks, with excuses. And you, being intuitive yourself, can feel the discord between the path they take and the path their spirit longs for. Another subtle behavior is their inability to stay, not physically, but existentially. They drift from themselves, from their commitments, from the emotional presence required to truly inhabit a moment. It is as if their soul sits beside their body rather than inside it. They nod, they agree, they engage, but somewhere behind their gestures, you can sense an absence, like a room furnished beautifully, but missing the person who once lived there. This absence is not a choice, it is a symptom of disconnection. They have wandered so far from their own essence that returning feels impossible. And here lies the paradox you must hold gently. Spiritually empty people often appear so full of opinions, of schedules, of goals, of clever phrases picked up from others. Their lives are crowded, but not inhabited. They accumulate experiences the way some collect rare artifacts, displayed, admired, but never truly lived. They move quickly, as though speed could compensate for depth. They accumulate relationships, yet never cultivate intimacy. Their achievements stand tall, but none of them cast a shadow because nothing rooted them. Perhaps you know someone like this. Perhaps you have loved someone like this. Perhaps you have tried to reach into their emptiness, hoping to fill it with your presence. But emptiness cannot be filled from the outside. It can only be awakened from within, and sometimes the more you give, the more they withdraw, because receiving your light exposes just how little of their own remains. Their spirit recoils not from you, but from what your presence reflects back at them, the shape of their own forgotten depth. And here is the quiet truth many fear to admit. Emptiness can be contagious. Not because it spreads, but because your spirit instinctively lowers its flame to match the dimness of the room it enters. In the presence of spiritually empty people, you may feel your vividness dull, your intuition quiet, your essence shrink. You may begin to question your own depth, doubting the instincts that once guided you clearly. This is the danger of walking too long beside those who have abandoned their own inner life. You begin to loosen your grip on yours. But there is something else I must tell you, something I learned not from science or art, but from observing the tender mechanisms of the human soul. Emptiness is not the opposite of spirituality. It is the birthplace of it. Every awakening I have ever witnessed began in a state that felt like void. The spiritually empty are not dying. They are waiting for the faint vibration that reminds them they are still alive. Waiting for the spark that reveals their hollow interior, not as a failure but as space. Space that can be filled with meaning, with presence, with wonder reborn. And you, listening now, sensing the weight of these truths, you may realize that you too have passed through such hollows, that your quietest nights, the ones where you felt least yourself, were not signs of spiritual death, but invitations to rise. The soul contracts before it expands. It empties before it remembers its fullness. The cracks you see in others, the emptiness you detect are not final. They are thresholds. Perhaps that is why you feel drawn to this message, because your spirit recognizes the architecture of awakening hidden within the very behaviors that once disturbed you, because the emptiness of others taught you to protect your depth, to honor your intuition, to cultivate a presence that does not collapse when touched. The spiritually empty person is not your enemy. They are a mirror of what happens when the soul is neglected, and a reminder of what becomes possible when the soul is finally reclaimed. There is a final truth one must accept when observing the 7 subtle behaviors that reveal a spiritually empty person. Emptiness is not a flaw in their design, but a silence awaiting its next resonance. I learned this not through philosophy alone, but through the long hours spent restoring old paintings. The canvas that appears most damaged is often the one with the greatest potential for rebirth, for beneath its worn varnish lies a brilliance waiting to be uncovered. The spiritually empty are much the same. They are not broken, they are unawakened, and the signs you have learned to see are not condemnations, they are invitations to deeper understanding. When I look at such people, I do not see decay. I see tension, an inner conflict between what they once were and what they could become. Their subtle behaviors, avoiding presence, resisting authenticity, clinging to certainty, fleeing silence, are not the habits of a dead soul. They are the movements of a spirit, fighting not to vanish, but to survive. Even the void inside them pulses faintly, like the last ember hidden beneath cold ash, and if one listens closely enough, There is always a whisper, a hint, a tremor that reveals something still living beneath the stillness. The world, however, seldom looks closely. People mistake spiritual emptiness for apathy, for arrogance, for coldness. But the truth is softer, more tragic. Such individuals have not lost their spirit. They have simply forgotten how to inhabit it. Life overwhelmed them. Expectations drowned them. Noise suffocated them. Their inner flame dimmed not from lack of worth but from lack of breath. And so they walk among us like figures in half-finished sketches, outlined but not shaded with life. Yet you who walks with intuition, who senses the tremors of the unseen, cannot help but perceive where their lines break and where their shadows fail to fall. You see the gaps others ignore. You feel the absence others dismiss. And this ability, this sensitivity, is what distinguishes the spiritually awake from the spiritually empty. You are willing to witness what others refuse to see. You dare to look into eyes that avert themselves. You dare to sit in silence without fleeing. You dare to touch the places in yourself that still ache with unfinished meaning. And here in this daring lies your transformation. For as you learn to recognize emptiness in others, something begins to shift within you. The illusions you once lived by soften. The noise that once dictated your life grows quieter. The masks you once wore loosen at the edges. You begin to understand that the true danger is not in seeing emptiness. It is in living without seeing anything at all. The spiritually empty person teaches you through contrast the value of depth. They offer you a map of everything you must avoid becoming, and in doing so, they guide you toward your own awakening. But let me offer you a revelation that may unsettle you at first. You too carry fragments of emptiness within. We all do. Even I, in my years of study and creation, felt the hollow chambers inside me, moments where inspiration fell silent, where I gazed at the world and felt nothing stir. These moments frightened me until I realized they were not signs of spiritual failure. They were signs of metamorphosis. When the cocoon feels tightest, the wings are forming. When the silence feels deepest, the new voice is gathering strength. So understand this. The emptiness you witness in others is a reflection of the spaces in yourself, waiting to be illuminated. Do not fear these spaces. Do not rush to fill them with noise or distraction. Sit with them as a painter sits before a blank canvas, knowing that the void is not the enemy. It is the beginning. The spiritually empty person reminds you that absence is where creation starts. That silence is where intuition is born. That darkness is simply the room where the next dawn prepares itself. And now, as our time in this reflection draws to a close, I want to leave you with a final image. Imagine a room lit by a single candle. Around it stand figures, some bright, some dim, some nearly invisible. The spiritually empty stand there as well, their silhouettes faint, their flames hidden. But the beauty of light is that it does not diminish when shared. When one candle touches another, neither loses anything. Instead, the room grows brighter. You may not be able to awaken the spiritually empty. Their flame is theirs to reclaim. But you can protect your own flame. You can keep it steady in the presence of those who have forgotten theirs. And in doing so, you offer them something they cannot name yet deeply crave. A reminder that light still exists, that wonder survives, that spirit can be restored. If you ever doubt this, place your hand over your heart and feel its rhythm. Not the mechanical beat, but the subtle presence behind it. The quiet, persistent knowing that you are more than motion, more than breath, more than the patterns you inherited. You are a being of depth. You are a vessel of intuition. You are a bearer of inner fire. And the world needs those who refuse to dim themselves. Carry this awareness gently, like a flame cupped in your palms as you walk through a darkened corridor. Some will not understand your light. Some will avoid it. Some will try to borrow it, and some will awaken because of it. But walk anyway. Shine anyway. Live from your depth anyway. For in a world filled with spiritually empty people, the one who keeps their inner flame alive becomes not just a witness, but a beacon,